The room is cool and dark. Just beyond perception is a large expanse of white, waiting to be illuminated with color and motion. Here and there, murmurs break out in eager anticipation of the coming displays. Then, suddenly, the expanse is alight and music erupts into the room, intoning the now so familiar notes of the Star Wars theme song. People cheer, for this is the first new Star Wars movie since the prequels were released. Expectations were high. For so many, the third trilogy was more than a fun movie. It was a trip back to childhood wonder and excitement. The vicious news cycle combined with fan fervor had created an atmosphere of immense anticipation. Theaters were sold out and social media bloomed with conversation around the new movie. But a mere 2 hours and 15 minutes after the movie had begun, most viewers were disappointed and made that disappointment well known. Not only did the general Star Wars fanbase dislike the movie, but even the original creator of the Star Wars universe was not happy with the final result of the 7th movie of the franchise. As Kate Erblend notes in her article on IndieWire.com, Lucas wasn't too jazzed about the first film to come from the Disney acquisition. There's nothing new, he said. In each of the films in the original trilogy, it was important to him to present new worlds, new stories, new characters, and new technologies. In this one, he said, quote, "There weren't enough visual or technical leaps forward." Why was this disappointment common, even among those closest to the film? It did nothing new. As Lucas states, there are no new worlds, characters, ideas, or ideologies. Even though there was a new lineup of characters, the characters were merely new faces on the same story, making the film fundamentally the same as the previous movies. A key factor in Lucas's original productions was the continual growth in technical skill and character development, owing to much of the original movie's successes. These factors created successes of some movies and the failures of others. So, what must an up-and-coming movie producer do to help ensure success, both creatively and among an audience? Because of the massive amount of generally low-quality video uploaded to the internet each day, the digital motion picture creator must become very intentional. To stand out in all the noise, a digital motion picture producer must create technically excellent and emotionally engaging content. Any time spent browsing movie streaming platforms will result in an understanding of the sheer amount of movies available. And, because of this, good movies get lost in the sea of other films. Too many options leads the viewer to choose what looks interesting or what is familiar, both of which could lead to one's film not being selected. The solution to this is for the filmmaker to create technically excellent films. Films that astound the senses. A technically excellent film draws the audience in with the question, how did they do that? At the very least, a technically excellent film cannot break the audience's suspension of disbelief. In the early days of filmmaking, it was much more difficult to produce a technically excellent film due to bulky and finicky equipment. But a film, Triumph of the Will, a Nazi propaganda documentary created by filmmaker Leni Riefenstahl, provides a good example of a technically excellent film. The success of this film in part is attributed to its creative and daring production techniques. Thomas Redwood, a regular contributor to the publication Metro, comments on Riefenstahl's film saying, "It is a widely acknowledged masterpiece of cinema, but also a terrifying expression of Nazism. As a document of the 1934 Nazi Party Congress in Nuremberg, Triumph of the Will utilizes an astonishing array of techniques and stylistic devices to present a vast cinematic window into the deranged and feverish cultural atmosphere of early Nazi Germany." Riefenstahl's film, although created for a morally reprehensible end, made waves in the world of cinema. Because of the preparation and skill of the production, Triumph of the Will became more than a mere propaganda piece. It became a part of film history. Redwood continues, "She also employs a vast range of bold and innovative camera movements to draw the spectator into a visually immersive propaganda experience. Framings and compositions and movements, one shot famously ascending a giant flagpole, endow the film with aesthetic intensity and grandeur. All these things work in the service of the Nazi message." If Riefenstahl had merely documented the occasions of the Nazi Party, her film would have been buried in the flames of detest of the post-1945 world. But because she employed complex and motivated camera, lighting, sound, and editing, Her creation serves as a common example of a good film made for the wrong reason. To be clear, the aims of the Nazi Party enshrined in the work are morally wrong. And because Riefenstahl's work was so effective, not creating it could have prevented more damage from the Second World War. But as we cannot change history, we can at least learn from the past mistakes and successes of those before us. For example, Redwood notes that Triumph of the Will also utilizes well-placed sound design and contrasting lighting to improve the visual experience for the audience. Similarly, acclaimed cinematographer Ellen Kuras focuses on the importance of light. Quoted in Michael Kohler's Lights Film School article, How to Use Cinematography to Make Your Film Stand Out, Kuras outlines lighting questions that filmmakers should ask themselves, saying, what is the quality of light? What is the feeling of it? What is the color of it? What does it do? Does it move? Does it move with the character? Is it fixed? Do you want the light to be transparent? Or do you want us to feel the light? Do we need to know what the source is? Those are the questions that you really have to ask yourself, Kuras encouraged. Lighting decisions are not just random. Kuras spends much of her time considering light, and it has paid off in her excellent work. Today, many filmmakers lose sight of the real keys to good cinema, lighting and sound. But filmmakers like Riefenstahl and Kuras do not forget these critical elements, making their films even more effective. Thus, we can learn from history to understand that films must display a high level of technical achievement to stand out in the multitude of motion pictures and survive the test of critics and time. In a world full of choices and opportunities, content must stand for itself. Outside-generated interest only appeals to certain audiences of people. Thus, content must be intrinsically interesting. Practically, a film will not engage an audience member if the film itself is uninteresting. Most of the time, the audience member will have no idea about the creators or creation techniques utilized in the production of the film. The interest in technical achievement is lost on the average audience member. There must be other things interesting about the film, the story, the characters, the backstory, the scenes, and on and on. As Michael Korsky, a writer, editor, and filmmaker in Brooklyn, so clearly states, it's become a common refrain, one that's only grown louder and more prevalent among those of us wary and wary of cinema, that often seems like a series of jolts from a joy buzzer. But the belief that rapid cutting and condensed visual storytelling will have some kind of stroboscopic, brain-melting effect on our dear children has a familiar ring to it, and has contributed to a lot of the alarmism about Generation Z's alleged lack of attention spans. Today's movies run down the same beaten track, pace the same worn storytelling steps, and climb the ever-growing climactic mountain. More and more, movies are watched merely to check it off the list, or allow for conversation during lunch with a friend. Rarely does a film with any sizable budget push into new territory. Filmmakers who strive to stand out must create a film that stands by itself and intrinsically generates interest. Drawing solely on the same recurring story beats that succeeded before will only lead to audience disinterest. Korsky concludes in his article, Not Buying It, saying, cinema's progression will not be in a straight line, but it will be a progression. It's inevitable. It will regenerate as long as there are people and a planet to sustain it, and as long as those tasked with its stewardship treat it like it's the precious form it is, rather than a commodity. Korsky notes that the current film industry is in the throes of uniformity. The third trilogy in the Star Wars franchise brought much disappointment to the film community. Why? Disney, the producer of these movies, has no lack of talent or funding. The real issue lies within the executives. Large producers like Disney are fundamentally businesses, and businesses work hard to repeat successes. Thus, there was no creative room to create a fundamentally new story arc for Star Wars. Essentially, a shift into new territory came with too much risk. But, as Korsky concludes, those who still seek to create films that stand out will continue to push into uncharted territory. These films may never have the funding or manpower as large-budget studio productions, but these films will be emotionally engaging, always intriguing new audiences. Just as Star Wars The Force Awakens left much to be desired among the fan base, so too do many indie films miss the mark of audience success. But, although cutting through the video content noise, may not be as easy as dropping on the denoise effect in Premiere Pro, intentional filmmakers have a multitude of opportunities to shine onto the screen, capturing an audience, their audience.